There comes a moment of quiet, soul-deep moment when a woman realizes something she never thought possible. The man she once called hers may be gone for good. Not just out of reach, but out of heart. And in that moment, something inside her breaks that is far deeper than pride, louder than anger, and heavier than loneliness. When a woman fears she's lost you forever, she isn't just mourning the absence of a person. She's mourning the death of a connection, a future, and a part of herself that only ever came alive in your presence. You see, most people mistake silence for peace. But the silence of a woman who believes she's lost her man forever is filled with a storm of reflection, regret, and realization. She begins to remember things not in sequence, but in meaning. The way you looked at her when you laughed. The way you stood behind her when life got hard. The way your voice softened her rough days. And suddenly, the things she once overlooked become the very things she aches for the most. That is the sacred pain of absence. It isn't loud, it whispers, it visits at night. It interrupts her thoughts during the day. And it says, you didn't just lose someone, you lost something irreplaceable. That's when she knows it, deeply, eternally. She has feared and perhaps accepted that she may have lost you forever. And it is in that fear, that realization, that a transformation begins. The walls she built to prove she didn't need anyone begin to crumble. The mask she wore to seem unbothered starts to slip. And what's left is not weakness, it is truth. A raw, trembling truth that maybe she took something sacred for granted. Maybe she loved with her conditions instead of with her heart. Maybe she was more focused on being right than being present. Maybe she was loud when you needed her quiet, distant when you needed her close. You see, when a woman fears she's lost a good man forever, she doesn't go to war with you anymore. She goes to war with herself. Her memories become sermons. Her regrets become mirrors. And slowly, she begins to understand that love is not about winning. It's about cherishing. It's not about pride. It's about humility. It's not about waiting for the other person to change. It's about becoming someone who deserves the change she once prayed for. There's something holy in the way loss reveals truth. It cuts through ego. It silences blame. It awakens the parts of us we buried under excuses. And when that woman finally fears she's lost you forever, that's when she prays not for you to come back just to ease her loneliness, but for one more chance to do it right. She doesn't ask for comfort. She asks for forgiveness. Not just from you, but from the part of herself that neglected love while it still lived. But here's the powerful part. In that fear, she also begins to change. Slowly, honestly. She may not know if you'll ever return, but she makes peace with herself first. And in that peace, something inside her softens. She becomes the woman she wishes she had been when love was still within her grasp. That's the beauty of heartbreak when it's faced with truth. It doesn't just break someone down. It builds someone new, someone better, someone healed. And if you are that man she lost, know this. Her silence doesn't always mean she's done. Sometimes it means she's growing. Sometimes it means she's listening to the very voice she once ignored. And if you're the one who walked away, don't assume she didn't care. Don't assume her strength meant she wasn't hurting. When a woman fears she's lost you forever, her pain becomes prayer. Her prayer becomes repentance. And her repentance becomes redemption. Because at the end of the day, it's not about who was right or wrong. It's about what was real. And when something was real, it never leaves quietly. It leaves with echoes. It leaves with lessons. It leaves with change. Maybe you'll never walk the same road again. But if her fear of losing you has brought her closer to truth, then something eternal has happened. So don't ignore that fear. Whether you're the man who left or the woman afraid she's lost him, let this moment break you open, not break you down. Let it remind you that love isn't something to take for granted. It's something to honor, to protect, to fight for. Because once it's gone, and you fear it's gone forever, that's when you realize how sacred it truly was. There comes a stillness inside a woman when she begins to feel that the man she once loved, trusted, and believed in is truly slipping away. It is not an instant shock or a loud moment of realization. It comes softly, like dusk falling over a once sunny sky. It arrives in whispers when your name doesn't come up in conversation anymore, when she stops checking her phone for messages that never arrive, when her laughter doesn't reach the places it once did. Something in her spirit shifts, not because she wants it to, but because the truth has finally grown louder than her hope. This is the moment many don't see, because it happens in the dark, behind closed doors, where only God and her thoughts are witnesses. This shift is not just emotional, it is spiritual. Because love, when it's deep and real, roots itself in the soul. And when that love begins to unravel, it's not just her heart that hurts, it's her identity that trembles as at first, she tries to resist it. She clings to the echo of your voice, the ghost of your presence, the fragments of the connection that once made her feel whole. She replays the moments you stood beside her, the time she reached for your hand and found warmth, the way your words used to settle the storms inside her. But then comes the ache, the realization that those moments are no longer being made, only remembered. And that shift begins. It's not loud. It doesn't come with shouts or accusations. It's a quiet withdrawal, a sacred stillness where she finally begins to understand you may not be coming back. Her smile becomes polite instead of passionate. Her eyes lose a little light. Her spirit becomes guarded, not because she wants to punish you, but because she's starting to protect what's left of herself. And in that sacred pause between hoping and accepting, she begins to speak less about what she wants and more about what she's learning. She starts to remember who she was before she wrapped her soul around you. She rediscovers the version of herself who had dreams that didn't depend on someone else staying. And still, even as she grows, a part of her grieves. Because when a woman truly loves, she doesn't just give you her time, she gives you her spirit, her prayers, her faith. And when she fears she's lost you forever, it's not just about the loss of a man, it's about the loss of something she built her heart around. But you would never know it just by looking at her. She won't tell the world. She won't post her pain. But if you could hear her thoughts in the late hours of the night, you'd know. You'd know that something precious has shifted inside her, not because she stopped loving you, but because she started accepting what love became when it was no longer returned. And in that acceptance, her spirit moves. It doesn't break. It bends. It doesn't collapse. It transforms. Something old dies and something unseen begins to awaken. Regret is a heavy thing. It doesn't come rushing in all at once like anger or sorrow. It creeps in slowly, silently, in the spaces between memories and moments. When a woman fears she's lost you forever, regret becomes more than just a passing emotion. It becomes a mirror. A mirror that reflects all the things she wished she'd done differently, all the times she let pride speak louder than love, all the moments she thought there would still be more time to fix what was quietly breaking. At first, she resists the feeling. She tries to convince herself she did everything she could. She tells herself you were just drifting away, that maybe it was always meant to end. But regret doesn't fade when it's forced out. It grows louder when the noise dies down, when she's alone with her thoughts, when the distractions of the day are over and the silence of the night takes over. That's when it begins to speak. She remembers the words she could have said. The apologies that never came. The softness she withheld because she was scared of being too vulnerable, too exposed, too hurt. She remembers the way she looked at you without speaking, hoping you could read her mind, hoping you would understand the things she was too afraid to express. And now, in your absence, she realizes how many of those silent moments were missed. Chances, opportunities to reach out, to bridge the gap, to choose humility over distance. Regret doesn't just show her where you failed her, it shows her where she failed herself. It shows her the ways she chose to be strong instead of sincere, to be distant instead of honest, to be right instead of being loving. And that realization cuts deep. There is a sacred pain in regret that changes a person. It strips away the layers of ego and defense, and it reveals the core of who they truly are. She may not admit it out loud, not to her friends, not even to herself at first. But inside, her soul begins to confess, not for the sake of winning you back, but because the truth has finally become louder than her pride. Regret is the voice of truth whispered through the memory of love. It doesn't just remind her of what was lost, it teaches her why it was lost. And sometimes, that realization is the most powerful awakening a heart can experience. She begins to feel the ache of what could have been, not in a way that makes her desperate, but in a way that makes her honest. She no longer sees the story through her pain alone, she sees it through yours too. And that changes everything. Because when a woman looks back with regret, not just for being hurt, but for the way she may have hurt someone who loved her deeply, that's the moment pride finally falls. And in its place grows something rare. Something humble, something that makes her long not for a second chance just to feel loved, but a second chance to love better. Pride is a shield we all carry, especially when we're afraid. And for many women, pride becomes the armor they wear to keep from showing just how deeply they care. But when a woman fears she's lost you forever, something begins to break that is louder than any argument and deeper than any apology. Her pride, once held like a sword, begins to feel like a burden. In the beginning, she might have told herself she didn't need you. She might have convinced her friends and even her own reflection that she was better off, that she was strong, that she would move on without missing a beat. But strength without softness isn't wholeness, it's defense. And defense becomes a prison when love is real and fear of loss becomes truth. When the fear settles in, the fear that she may never hear your voice again, never see your name, light up her phone, never feel the warmth of your presence beside her, her spirit trembles. And the walls she built to protect herself begin to crack under the pressure of that silence. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, she keep pretending. She scroll through her days. She post smiles. She tell herself that if you wanted to reach out, you would. She replay every reason she had to walk away or every reason she thinks you did. But deep inside, there's another voice. It's softer, quieter, but it speaks the truth that pride tries to silence. It says, what if you were wrong? What if you let something sacred slip through your fingers? And in those quiet hours of confession, when no one else is around, her pride doesn't shout back, it begins to surrender. This is the moment when the breaking begins. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's sacred. It's the moment when her soul reaches beyond the arguments and the hurt and touches something eternal: remorse, humility, love. Not the shallow kind of love that only stays when everything is perfect, but the kind that aches when it realizes it didn't show up enough when it mattered most. That's when she stops rehearsing the reasons she stayed distant. She stops justifying the silence. She starts remembering the way you looked at her when your love was still unshaken, and how many of those moments she dismissed or ignored because she thought she had more time. And slowly, something begins to rise from the pieces of her broken pride, something softer, something honest. Her heart doesn't want to win anymore. It wants to heal. It wants to reach out, not to fix the past, but to acknowledge it. Not to demand something from you, but to admit what she held back. That is the sacred moment when pride dies and truth is born. It is not a moment of weakness. It is a moment of surrender, not to you, but to the truth that love was never meant to be a battlefield, and that maybe, just maybe, it was her pride that stood in the way of peace. When a woman fears she's lost you forever, her emotions don't just rise, they transform. They aren't the same emotions that fueled the arguments or painted her face with frustration. No, these are deeper, purer, and far more sacred. They come from a place that no longer wants control or justification. They rise from the well of her spirit, stirred by loss and quiet truth. This is not the performance of pain. This is the awakening of what was once buried under strength, stubbornness, and the pressure to act like she didn't care. In this space, her emotions become real, raw, redeemed. Her tears are no longer a sign of weakness. They are the release of everything she never gave herself, permission to feel while the relationship was still breathing. Now that she fears, it's gone. Those suppressed emotions rise like a flood, no longer held back by fear or denial. She may find herself crying not because you hurt her, but because she finally realizes how much she loved you. And not the version of love that simply longs to be loved in return, but the kind of love that aches with the memory of moments lost. The kind that remembers the way you used to smile at her in silence. The kind that replays your shared laughter during ordinary days that now feel holy in hindsight. These emotions don't ask questions like, "Why didn't he fight for me?" Instead, they whisper, "Why didn't I cherish him when he did?" She begins to see you differently, not through the lens of pride or pain, but through the clarity that only distance and reflection can bring. And that clarity stirs a new kind of emotion. One that mourns, yes, but also one that begins to feel alive again. Alive with truth. Alive with understanding. Alive with the humility that only heartbreak can teach. She doesn't cry because she wants to manipulate you. She cries because something inside her is changing. Her heart is softening in ways it never did when she was trying to protect it. She may remember the way your hand felt in hers and wonder why she ever let go. She may recall the comfort of your presence and feel an ache, not because you're gone, but because she never said how much she valued it while you were there. Her emotions begin to paint the full picture, not just the parts that fit her version of the story. And in that full picture, she sees her own silence, her own distance, her own walls. But more than anything, she feels. She allows herself to feel fully, finally. And in that feeling, something is reborn. Not just the pain of loss, but the truth of love. And love, when it returns to its purest form, always brings emotion with it. Not chaos. Not drama. But the sacred kind of emotion that flows like a prayer from a heart that now understands what it once didn't. There comes a point in the quietness of her soul when she stops thinking about what was said and begins pleading silently, inwardly. Earnestly, not with you, but with God, with herself, and with the universe, for just one more chance. Not for the sake of proving anything, not to undo what's already been done, but to love better, speak softer, and show up more fully than she did before. This plea doesn't sound like desperation on the surface. She may still go about her day with strength in her voice and composure in her posture, but deep within there's a cry echoing through her spirit. If only I could go back, if only I had held on tighter, if only I had seen clearer. That voice doesn't speak from vanity or ego anymore, it comes from truth. Truth that often only surfaces when everything has slipped through her fingers, when she is no longer sure she will ever again hold what once gave her peace, security, and belonging. She isn't pleading for attention. She's pleading for the sacred space to rebuild something beautiful from the ruins she helped create. This is where her pride falls fully and finally to the ground. This is where she no longer wants you back just to fill a void. She wants you back so she can fill yours. She wants to pour into the empty places she never noticed were there while love still lived between you. She no longer blames you for the distance. She blames herself for the delay in seeing what truly mattered. She doesn't think of grand gestures or dramatic words. Her heart now longs for simple things, to hold your hand again, to hear you breathe beside her in the night, to walk through small moments with eyes wide open. Her plea isn't loud, but it is real. It comes when the weight of your absence becomes heavier than her ability to fake her strength. It comes when she realizes that moving on may not be the same as healing. It comes when she begins to see that closure doesn't always come through forgetting, but through forgiveness. And she wants that not only to be forgiven, but to offer forgiveness too, not just to you, but to herself. Because deep down, she knows she wasn't always kind. She wasn't always patient. She wasn't always present. And her inner voice, once full of self-justification, now speaks with remorse, reflection, and humility. If you could hear her soul now, you wouldn't hear anger or bitterness. You'd hear the quiet, trembling longing of someone who just wants one more sunrise with you. One more chance to meet you not as the person she pretended to be, but as the woman she is becoming. She's not asking for a repeat of the past. She's praying for the opportunity to create something new. She's not reaching out because she can't be alone, she's reaching inward, discovering that love was never about holding on tightly, but about holding each other rightly. There is a moment that arrives quietly but powerfully when the tears have dried, the shouting has stopped, and all that remains is the aching truth of what's been lost. And in that stillness, something begins to rise inside her, not just sorrow, not just longing, but a deeper call. It's not the call to go back and pretend nothing happened. It's the call to forgive, the call to restore. And this call does not begin with you, it begins with her. When a woman fears she's lost you forever and the storm of emotion has finally passed, her heart begins to search for peace, not from circumstances, but from within. At first, she may have wanted to blame you, to point to your distance, your silence, your mistakes. But time and reflection have a way of softening even the hardest edges. And suddenly, she sees not just what was done to her, but what she did in return. She sees her own silence, her own sharp words, her own refusal to bend when love was asking her to yield. And that is where the call begins. It whispers to her soul that if anything real was ever there, if the love she once claimed was true, then the next step isn't punishment, it's peace. Forgiveness becomes the only way forward, whether or not reconciliation follows. She begins to forgive you, not because you begged for it, but because she no longer wants to carry the weight of resentment. She forgives herself not because she didn't make mistakes, but because she now understands that healing doesn't happen where shame lives. And in that forgiveness, something even more powerful starts to awaken, the desire to restore. Not to force the relationship back into its former shape, but to return to the heart of what love was meant to be. She doesn't want to repeat the past. She wants to redeem it. Her spirit no longer wants to win or prove anything. It wants to rebuild something holy, something honest, something that is born not out of desperation but from transformation. If she could reach you now, it wouldn't be with accusations or demands. It would be with a quiet voice that says, "I see where I went wrong, and I wish I had seen it sooner." Her heart doesn't want to argue anymore. It wants to understand. It doesn't want to reopen old wounds. It wants to heal the ones that never properly closed. This is not weakness. This is courage, the kind that looks at broken pieces and believes they can still be held together, not perfectly, but redemptively. The call to forgive and restore is not for the faint of heart. It is for the one who is willing to let go of control and grab hold of grace. And if you were to answer that call with her, it wouldn't mean going back to what you were. It would mean moving forward into something stronger, softer, and sanctified by everything it took to finally understand what love is truly made of. When a woman fears she's lost you forever, It is not simply the end of a relationship, it is the beginning of her deepest self-awakening. Through sorrow, through silence, through reflection and regret, her heart is forced to confront truths that comfort never asked her to face. She begins to see what was real, what was wrong, and what could have been right. And though her pain is personal, her transformation is spiritual. Her emotions become her prayers. Her regrets become her lessons. Her pride is stripped away, and what remains is something far more sacred than perfection: humility, forgiveness, and a quiet longing not for the past, but for redemption. This is not a speech about broken hearts alone. It is about the human soul. It is about what happens when we finally realize that love is not promised, that connection is not guaranteed, and that the people who walk into our lives are not always meant to stay, but they are always meant to teach us something eternal. If she fears she's lost you forever, it means there was something worth fearing. And that fear, if faced with honesty and grace, can become the beginning of healing, not just between two people, but within one soul. So whether you are the one who left or the one left behind, know this: what breaks us can also rebuild us if we allow it to. What seems like an ending may be the whisper of a better beginning. And if her heart is trembling with the fear that she has lost something sacred, then perhaps it's because something sacred was truly there. And sacred things, when handled with truth, never return the same. They return stronger, deeper, and more alive than before.